Hi folks, this is Tony at TravelScoot again. In this video, we're going to show you how to replace the controller on the Escape. If you're familiar with the Deluxe, it's very similar. There are just a few minor but notable differences. Let me start by letting you know what tools you're going to need for this. You're going to need your 3mm Allen wrench from your toolkit. So I'm going to set the other ones aside because they're useless in this one. A pair of wire cutters. These are actually flush zip tie cutters. So you can also cut soft bar with these anyway, but we dedicated them to this. Obviously, you'll need your replacement controller at hand. 6 cable ties and a strip of Velcro, about 5 3/4 inches, because we're going to have to remove this battery padding Velcro to remove the controller connection. We'll do our very best to remember to include these in every shipment every time we send out a controller. Let's start by removing the controller cover. We'll start with the upper screw just because it's more visible and tight. And now you can take the short end and remove that screw. Put that over here. We have one down below, just behind the trailing arm. Don't know if Kevin can see it. Slightly more difficult to get to. As you can tell, once again, I'm working on a table, not crawling around on my hands and knees on the floor. Okay. Let's take the controller cover, slide it back a little. The controller should slide out. There's nothing really retaining it. But this is brand new, so the parting compound and stuff may have taken a bit of a set. Just as a reminder, the connector is set in here in a slot so that it can't be pulled out, so forth. That is actually what retains this connector, so this is what we need to do to remove it. But also on installation, remember to get this squarely aligned and insert it into that retainer. Set that aside. Now I've got our controller sitting here. What we need to do down here then is remove the battery Velcro. There's no need to clean up all that adhesive. It's not that big a deal. But as you can tell, there are 2 zip ties that retain this connection. They straddle the connection. One's on the controller connector, the other one's on the motor connector, but for the sake of visibility and ease of installation, we're going to cut them both. Okay. I'm going to wait with that for just 1 second. Actually, I'm going to do that right now. Let's tip this thing on its side. Once again, for the sake of better visibility. You can see the connector. You can see the slot where the zip ties are supposed to pass through. Let's disconnect the connector and be very careful with these pins. Now we're going to tip it back up. Set it down. This is where these other zip ties will get cut. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's pull out the controller wire the rest of the way, and do it gently. You don't want to rip on this thing. We've removed the connector for the throttle and the connector for the on-off switch. The on-off switch is the wider of the 2. And just remember where these are. You don't have to pull these out too far if you can help it. There is some resistance. Okay, now that we've got that taken care of, let's go ahead and pull out this controller through this slot. Now that we've got the controller out, I just want to remind folks that if we have a troubleshooting issue, in other words, if we're trying to determine if it is in fact the controller that needs to be replaced before we're positive, it's very easy to test the controller on the scooter without going through the entire routing and tying process. What you do in that case is you just connect up the on-off switch and throttle. I'm just going to do the on-off switch here right now because it's going to be a little tedious to fiddle with the throttle at this point. Connect the motor connector, and I'll take this as an opportunity to remind folks of the importance of aligning those two arrows. Vital. If they're misaligned, you'll bend one of the 9 pins or more of the 9 pins, and that will ruin the entire motor core. And now you can plug your battery in and operate the scooter in a test environment, let's call it, on the table or on the floor, without having to go through the rigmarole. If the controller replacement doesn't fix the issue, then we know we've got something else going on. Anyway, back to installing the controller. Plug everything here. We'll route the controller wire. Insert the controller with the ribs facing the back of the fork, and the connector in this position, the numeral 1 with the red wire, needs to be facing the inside of the scooter. In other words, if you're looking at the scooter from the rear, it should be on the right. Consequently on the left. Also, it could go where the white dot is on the controller cover if the controller cover has one. We'll start by inserting the controller connector in its receiving slot. And sort of wangle the box around the controller. And now I'll fish around a little bit to align the bolt hole. Get it started by hand. Wiggle the controller until the threads are engaged. You just need to spin it in there loosely. We're going to do the same thing with the nuisance on the bottom. I'm going to do this from a photogenic angle. All right, we got that. When both of them are started and almost to the bottom, or rather to where they need to be, go ahead and finish tightening them. Make sure you do get both bolts in before you tighten one or the other. It's a real pain in the butt to have to go back and loosen. All right, I'm going to go ahead and connect the throttle and on-off switch. In this case, I'm going to take a small tool. A little awkward with Kevin waving around in front of me, but that's just the way things go sometimes. So normally I'd flip this over and just get it from a different angle. Make sure your trigger engages, your lock. The same thing. Actually, I do kind of like holding this with a small tool. Okay, we got that. Just stuff them back in their little cubby hole here. Out your cable ties. Just FYI, it is possible to over-tighten cable ties. Should be snug, but not so extreme. And this is where the flush cutting cable clippers come in place. Cut them nice and flush. I'll show you what people hate. Ooh, I call that the saber-tooth tie wrap. Don't bother. Might as well just leave them alone if you're going to do that. Some people have a tendency to want to tighten further by leveraging the cable tie end. That's not necessary. That will actually over-tighten the cable tie. All right, we've got that squared away. Now let's flip her over. Okay. Once again, the alignment of the two arrows is critical. Got it. Okay. And I will take these two cable ties, insert them through here, and you may have to have somebody help you guide the top in. I flip it around again, and in there. Just a little tip, if you have the scooter on its side like that, have the cable tie lock on the bottom. It just makes it a little easier to pull on them, to tighten them when you have them installed. To feed this through a little bit. Clippers, cut them flush. Back over. Man, I love how light these are. Okay, just get a rough idea. Make sure our bolt is the right length. Okay, and now comes the Velcro challenge. As always, kind of a treat. Start by placing the back flush. Get stuffed in the corner there. This is more our arts and crafts section. Probably not my strong suit, but looks like it's working out okay. Well, what do you know? And as you can tell, it wasn't really necessary to remove the old adhesive as long as the old adhesive wasn't dirty and dusty. If this is done on a scooter that's been in service for quite some time, you may actually have to take some solvent to remove the old adhesive, what's left of it, just because it's accumulated grit and grime over time, and that's going to make the new Velcro not want to stick properly. All right, folks, that's basically it. Thanks a lot.